welcoming Mr. Anthony Lopez to host the next poolside chat, and Ms. Khushbu Solanki Sharma and Ms. Ankita Nankliorkar.
I'm just going to try and establish the context of today's discussion with these two ladies. We'll try and do it slightly differently and at a different plane other than the other discussions happening. So I'm going to quote this lady called Becky Bermott of IDEO, and she talks about design when working effectively is meant to represent the voice and desire of customers. And John Meda had tweeted this about 2 days back, so it intrigued me and interestingly. The other thing which basically we as designers always think about designer as an influencer. Shrikantji spoke about that how Indian designers, we have not moved too further in being influencers of society as such. So we say that basically that can we become influencers and be transformative and trigger change, thereby. Which is slightly different from the first quote which I gave. And the last is basically today we are in the times of technology and all these things which are happening at such a fast pace that even the world is grappling with the speed at which things are moving. So can we as people be adaptive and agile? So I would like to use this opportunity with both you ladies to see that you are now on stage. So can you show us some direction in this regard, and thereby the context of which I have established here, can we use this platform to discuss these aspects in an interesting manner? So let's start with Ankita Khushbu, who's the founder and chief idea people at Zero Gravity, to very briefly tell us about your business and what you do.
So
Yeah.
I've had multiple hats. I have been business consultant. I have been salesperson. I have been technology person. And 2014, I finally ventured with my studio called Zero Gravity Communication. And we call our team the idea people. So basically, I call myself a creative strategist, whereby business is kept at the center of any of the creative or communication strategies that I and my team work with. More about me, I think just open my LinkedIn and you will find a lot. So we'll talk about a discussion rather than all about me today.
Over to you, Ankita.
So I started out my career in the advertising industry, and then I obviously moved closer to brand strategy. I studied and worked in Italy, came back, and I started Firebrand with a keen focus on the startup community because I saw this huge gap in the market where the startups were a little ignored. So Firebrand is a strategic branding and marketing company. We are very research driven and we are niche in the sense that we cater to mainly startups and new businesses. And we're also a very lean company so that we are adaptive, like you mentioned, and we prefer to work as a part of the client's teams rather than an agency-client relationship. So that's a little bit about Firebrand.
So again to you, what philosophy defines your studio?
So our philosophy really lies in the name itself. I think Firebrand is someone who's really passionate and stands for a cause and creates an unrest, and also the term fire. Most of the startups have this fire in their belly and they wake up with passion every day. So that is what really defined our studio. As long as we stand for the passion that startups are formed with and we bring our best foot forward, I think that's how our company is pretty much made.
Fire in the belly. What about you?
So for Zero Gravity, the philosophy, as a core philosophy, what we call is, there's a term that we use called independently together. So we are a bunch of 30 different individuals with different skill set, and we aim to come together for any brand that engages with us with a simple idea that we can't just create something that is in long term going to benefit, and we can't just keep looking at a short term gains that client is immediately looking at. So we try to find that balance with inclusive branding principles. We have methodology and systems put in place for every aspect of branding that we work with, and we try to follow that. There's a lot of education that has been done to client in how to go about it, what to be done, and that's what we are kind of very good at. So any relationship that we've engaged in last 4 years, almost 60% we have retained our clients and grown based on the reference and leads that are inbound come. So there's no salesperson in my company. That
That's good
philosophy has
performance.
worked for us
Good,
so
good
far.
performance, yeah. So again, what we are trying to do in this particular discussion, I asked Ira permission that we should have question answer session with the audience in this. So we will try and be quick with our questions, and so that there's some exchange and some learnings from each other. So can you very quickly tell us about a project experience where you felt great about the results?
So there's a brand, it's a conglomerate, 50-year-old brand. It's my first client. So when I just got started and I was an independent consultant, the brand called me based on some of design work that we had done for them. And they said that, you know what, one of a very big agency said no to us because we don't have advertising budget. And we don't know what to be done because we are a legacy company. And I just simply looked at the logo and said that, you know, your logo says since 1965, it's 2014. Next year you complete 50 years. And I think that's a good start to do the whole branding exercise with all the touch points and create a communication strategy for it. And they were just looking at me and said, okay, can you do that? And it's 5 years, we are working with them, and every stage, every communication has been taken care. Personally, the good part is this is a brand sitting out there, one of the industry leader, but nobody thought they could be a client. So we thought branding communication is something, every brand, whether you are selling consumer goods, whether you are selling B2B material, whether you are selling machines or parts, has certain human connection contacts that makes that brand appealing to the other part. It needs the language of communication, and we can't just keep giving focus to B2C brands and not look at other ones. So that's where we try to focus, and personally I feel it as a my success story that I still continue to work for the brand, add value every year, and we are able to integrate ourselves, one of our extended team members that she rightly said in that case. So yeah.
So long-term interventions.
Yeah, so
with the
short term
brand,
as
yeah.
well as long term. There has to be a mix of both. Because if we keep selling the long term picture as, you know, you have to have everything right and you need to have all the pieces put together, client loses patience and they say that, okay, that's what I'm going to do, but what about current cash flow? So I need things that make me go on right now. So we try to find the balance between both.
Yeah, I'm yet to find that balance. What about you?
So I'd like to give an example of a very interesting project. We started working with them around 2.5, 3 years ago. So it's a pet food, natural dog food brand. A couple had a strong vision, a really fantastic vision that they want to launch natural dog food because dog food is a very unregulated segment, and there are like these heavy weights that are in the market, and they really wanted to bring value to the market. The vision was great, but there was no direction. Even the product was not really in place. So we started working with them, and we did this almost 6-month-long research where we went to different markets, Delhi, Pune, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Calcutta. We spoke to all the stakeholders, so pet parents, trainers, vets, breeders, really tried to understand what is in it, what are the gaps in the market. So a couple of key challenges that came out is the consumer is extremely ignorant. They are pretty much driven by vets. The second key challenge was there are heavy weights in the industry, like you have the Royal Canines and Pedigrees of the world. So obviously to compete at that marketing cost will be a challenge. So what we came up with was, let's listen to our consumers and let's make a brand that is for the consumers, that empowers the consumers. So we came up with this brand called Wagon Love, which basically was based on a very simple insight that we got from the consumers directly, where consumers believed, pet parents believed that dogs are a part of their family. And none of the brands that were in the market were playing on that sentiment. So we really took that insight and we built the entire brand narrative around how pets are family. So right from their packaging to their communication to every single touch point really resonated with that idea. And the way we broke the clutter in terms of packaging was, if you observe pet food packaging, it has a dog's picture and some key USPs. What we've done through the packaging is we've created a very illustrative story where there's a human and dog love exchange that is shown up front. So we really got noticed by the consumers for them to at least pick up the pack. And then, of course, the communication started. And, of course, we didn't want to alienate the vets because they are the biggest influencers. So we first launched the product around India with the vets. And it's been 6 months since the product is on shelf, and it's already, we're getting a lot of good feedback, a lot of repeat customers, also supporting a lot of causes through the brand. So it is something that's very fulfilling for us as a team.
Fantastic. So it's your process will determine the entire result, which is for the people, by the people type of result. Okay. So now we have established so-called a field which all of us understand the context of both these ladies, and we'll put forward a question which says, it's like I'll give my example. It took a long time for me to reach a stage level like this, So I had to do a lot of work, plow a lot of fields, and then reach on a stage to say something. You guys are very young. So what's the greatest advantage you have currently?
So the greatest advantage is we can have lots of options, we can make lots of mistakes, we can fail, get up and do it again. I think age is just a number, but it always gives you that mental strength that, it's okay. If something didn't work out, you can do it again. So before I started my venture, I tried 3 times doing it with someone or maybe with a loan, and it was just not happening. It was just not getting. So, but third time when I did with Zero Gravity, it was like, okay, I'm doing it and it's going to happen. If it doesn't work out, fine. I'm a good professional. I'll get a job. But it did work. So age gives you that option to really mentally have that strength to keep going on, trying new things, making mistakes, learning from it, and not being tired of it. And maybe if once that gets into your habit or nature, then however old you get, you continue to follow that.
So you got time to make more mistakes. That's great.
Yes, I believe that.
What about you?
So I agree with Khushbu, but I also feel that one of the biggest advantages that we have being young is the fact to unlearn everything that we've learned and to be really adaptable. So there are no fixed theories, like there's no set rule of branding or design. There are obviously principles, but as you age, you get very fixed with your ideas. When you're younger, you can learn right from an intern to somebody who's probably not as experienced, to somebody who's very experienced. So it gives you that adaptiveness and that, the whole idea of constantly changing by unlearning.
Fantastic. So you're talking about adaptive and then learning from it. Basically, you all both come from advertising background of sorts, which is a different field from design. Advertising is more quick results oriented, tactical in nature, and you all are doing something very different, which is branding, which is long-term, strategic oriented stuff. So what is your take on how is that balance struck?
So the work that we do is very long-term, because I think when you're really trying to derive value for new businesses or create a brand, it cannot be topical. It cannot be something that is in the moment, because when you create brands, it has to be sustainable and it has to be long-term. So having said that, I think the overall idea of creating long-term plans and strategies is what drives values for startups and businesses, in my opinion. So the work that we do is more strategic and not really tactical and everyday.
Okay, what about you, Khushbu?
I think it's a balance for both, because I work with mixed bag of companies. Some are startups, some are large companies, and in both the cases, they are looking for mix of the ideas from us. Now there are many good clients who come and say, okay, take your time, learn and understand my brand. Otherwise, I've usually seen the client get you on board and they just want you on roll, like from the day one. And if you take your own sweet time, then you are like off before you even realize. So what I have learned, your question was to how you connect with that. So when I started with my job, I used to complain a lot to my family that I don't know what I'm doing. Every day I'm just thrown to different things. I don't know, today I'm talking to this consultant, tomorrow I'm doing different things, and how is it adding any value. And today, after 15, 16 years, when I look back, I think everything that I was made to do has helped me where I am today. So I think it's all amalgamation of everything. The more and more experience you get, the more and more, portfolio you build in, you amalgamate lot of learning that helps the next client that comes out, and that client teaches or helps you make new mistake that helps another one. So it's a mix of tactical and strategy, because if you keep going into that race of giving short-term solution, then again client will get restless after some time. So most of our engagement are ongoing and long-term. So we try to find the balance. And sometimes if client drag us another way, we really work hard to bring that sense and sensibility in them. And if that doesn't work out, we decide we don't want to even waste our energies here.
Sense and sensibility. That leads to my next question. How do you influence your client? Because we're in the business of branding and to do the right things in a meaningful way.
So, do you mean to say how do we influence the clients, or?
Yes, because you may figure out that there are certain contradictions in context to what needs to be right or not right, or or how to be meaningful to your customer in that sense, and how to connect. And
so in 5 years, one thing that I've learned is choose your clients very wisely. It's fine, someone pays you to do job, and someone might pay you the highest, but decide, do you really want to work with them? Because your time is limited as individual, as company, your team members, and do you really want money, or because money is going to flow, that I understand, from anywhere if you're doing right job, but which is that client you want to spend your time with? Because if you don't get that wavelength at the same pace in your initial few meetings with client, then it's just not worth getting into it. Because I have worked with a lot of clients where I've done a lot of education, a lot of teaching, a lot of, they believe in my capability and my team's capability, and then they trust us, and then we tell them, okay, 6 months, 1 year, you're not going to question us. And if you have that patience, then you work with us. Otherwise, let's just decide milestones. Like, these are the 3 months milestone or 6 months milestones. And then if you're meeting that, then just trust the process. Otherwise, we've part ways with some of them. We've said that it's not going to work out, or we don't feel that we are adding value. Because what has happened is, for our size company, we very quickly compete with freelancing work, individual work. So when everything as a communication and strategy is put into place, a client, just to save a few bucks, will go to a freelancer and say that now somebody else is going to follow. Now you have to choose very wisely that, for you, it's been a long process. And then suddenly one fine day, client is just going to cut his cost. So how the balance come out and who is the client you want to work with, that's the right answer to where we want to take our work ahead.
Ankita, I'll just repeat my question for you, is that how do you influence the client in doing the right thing?
Right. So very close to what Khushbu has to say as well, but we end up, before we get a client on board, we end up spending a lot of time educating them and explaining the process to them. So coming from an advertising background, that is something, advertising agencies, a lot of them, they churn, they work like factories. When I started Firebrand, I was like, it's going to be everything but a factory. We want to build value for clients. We want to deliver value. So to produce a baby, if it takes 9 months, you cannot pull it out in 4 months. So we explain that to the clients. And we've had a lot of cases where clients are like, yeah, sounds good. Let's start 6 months, great. But the minute pressure builds in, they have internal investors to answer to. They start putting pressure, and they come back saying that, hey, you know what, we had planned for 6 months, but let's do it in 4 months now. That is when we again, hit the drawing board. We assess where we are. We literally hold their hand and help them see value as to how those additional 2 months is actually an investment and not a pressure point that is eating into their costs. So I think it's a lot of hand-holding, a lot of education, and more often than not, they buy into it if they're the right clients that you're working with.
Okay, so taking them along, making them commit to a long-term perspective and hand-holding them, right? Yeah. How are you doing on time? Ira,
Sorry?
are we doing on time? Who's the timekeeper?
I think we have... Yeah.
How many minutes to go? 10 minutes. So I'll just... a very important question which we've been asking ourselves as designers for ages is about the role of design reflecting the Indianness in us. We are going to be the third largest economy very soon. We're going to be influencing the world in many ways. India is moving at extremely fast pace. Its design, of course, is not moving at that pace. But in context to what is Indianness and importance of Indianness, does our work needs to be seeped in Indianness, as I say, So let's start with you.
Yeah, so visually, I don't think it really needs to speak Indianness or represent India, because I think we're a very global mindset, like you rightly said, and we are moving ahead with times. But the way we can embrace Indianness is the way we work, the values that India stands for, the diversity, the unity, the cultural differences, understanding, empathy with consumers. I think that is a very strong way of embracing Indianness in the way we work, rather than visually for it to represent. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes. What about you?
I think that's a very important part of it. We work with, so far globally also, for Indian brands only. And every brand, I think there's a term called GOKAL, so globally local. So every brand wants to be a perspective or put forward as a global brand, keeping the local values intact. So very simple example is, we've done one of a project where a startup only, but they wanted to come up with their skincare brand with Indian values in it. And the category had a lot of other player using a lot of design elements of India and flowers and forest and everything was used, and they were like, we don't want to be a copy. We don't want to be anything looking like that, and still I want to be an Indian brand. How do I go about it? So then there was a story that we built that, how the sourcing of their ingredient is from authentic Indian places, and we built every location's monuments into illustration and embedded a story for that. Or recently for a campaign that we did for a jeweler, they said that, I don't want to be Tanishq with multiple stores in India. I want to just keep my one store. But how do you make someone from Delhi and Bombay to come and shop at my store in Ahmedabad? So we kind of bought Ahmedabad in his store so that Delhi or Calcutta or Bombay people aspire to come to Gujarat, and when they come to Ahmedabad, this is the place they come down to. So now this is where your Indian design, your Indian presence, your Indian aesthetics are helping you to define what you are as a brand, integrate into a very integrated format in our communication, and make it a global perspective, because everyone wants to sell today to different larger market compared to only India. So every brand that you look at has somewhere down the line international connect, so it can't be so desi, or it can't be so rudimentary in their approach. So that's where, locally global is the thing that I see in a lot of brands. They don't know, but indirectly they point us in that direction.
Yeah, so global.
That's
Global,
what I think.
yeah.
It's like kind of a thing to go
Sometimes
look
I
at.
use another word called khichdi. But so that's the balance we got to strike in terms of being Indian and yet, being international or global in nature. So I'll stop my questions here. My last question was, how important is it for us to champion design? Each one of us. So I will not ask you to answer that, because it's very important for audience to ask questions. So over to you.
I'm sorry, we'd have questions at the end of the entire session.
I had asked special permission.
Oh, you did.
And the lady in blue gave me the permission.
All right.
Questions, please. Let's take this opportunity of asking questions. In context to the discussion, I can't believe this. There we go.
Even he has.
So
Not to me, to the ladies.
Yeah. In the practice, it's any of you can answer that. In the practice that you do, how much of the work you do is led by a practitioner as in a single person's perspective, right? Somebody driving the aesthetic and all that, versus how much is done by insight or research or by data.
Do you go ahead. Go ahead.
So for us, when it is depends on the project. We recently completed a project for a packaging where we're launching a category of a product which is widely not accepted in India. It's in food product not accepted in India. So we had a good research done by a brand across more than 1,000 retail stores with the product sampling. And the pointers that we got from there was the pure basis of our design. Everything was concluding to that because we wanted to not fail on that one point because already we knew that the product category is not open. So we had to work very hard to address that point. That's like a dire situation where the brief or the requirement is like that. Otherwise, the design is mainly requirement driven, especially in digital. So when we are doing, we work on a print, digital, social, all three mediums. So when it is print, the aspects that as an output is required is considered. When it is digital, it's the medium decides, takes over the consistency of the application. When it is social, we have seen simply we have to see the reaction. So everyday campaigns are run. If they are performing good, what's not performing, the numbers coming back tells us that visuals have too much content, visuals are not making sense, or so then you have to change it and it has to follow the same language that has been done. So depending on the media that we are taking, when it is absolutely necessary, 100% we fall on that. When we have a liberty and create a category and open the door and let our creative team play on it, we let them do it. And we kind of force that, non-data driven approach that it's looking good, it's pleasing, it's loud, let us do it. So it's not thumb rule.
Let it be quick.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that as well. It's the work that we do is not a single person's job, so it's never really led by a single person. We depend a lot on data. We depend a lot. So design is very gut-based, yes. But before we even get to design, we do research, whether it's for a restaurant, whether it's for a pet food, whether it's for technology. We let a lot of data drive our strategy. Because with data, with primary research, you identify what the consumer wants, and you also know what your client's goals are. And when they come together, you have a strong strategy, which then guides design. So
my question is that yours is a growing setup, and yours seems to have evolved a bit more. When it's even more growing, how do you look at the quality of your strategy coming out? Of course, when you started as a founder, your solution is the key to, your strength of the company. But how do you maintain and it doesn't get diluted, how do you maintain that threshold? And let's say how you recruit also, or do you even look at it from the top, or at what points do you need to check or not check at all?
So I made because I didn't come from advertising, I came from consulting business. I structured my company very differently. There's no typical advertising structure at my firm. We don't have a salesperson as yet. We have 5 account managers instead of that. Reason being that we built on the existing accounts, and one of the things my ex-boss told me is that if you do a good job with one client, he'll give you 5 more. It'll save your time to hunt for 15 and then get another 5. So focus on that. And I stick to that today also. So having said that, I structured very well. Our processes are put in place. Our people are rather than recruited, trained. So I prefer to hire people and train them rather than get people from other agency coming with preconceived notion, things are done like that here and I will follow this. Instead of that, the people, even experienced people when we take, we see the aptitude first, drive first, and skills as a basic skill set, and then they are adapted into the structure that we have. So 40 accounts that we manage, with 30 people team, everyone has a clarity of their role. Anyone who enters in the company, which node or which entry point they're entering, it's clear in which department. Everyone, most of our senior people have grown with me, started and then grown or have shown capability to handle the bigger portfolio and do things differently. So to answer your question's first part, that how the dilution doesn't happen is a very conscious step I have seen, because I've faced it. I wouldn't lie saying that it has never happened. It has happened, and whenever a 5% or 6% of that dilution I see, I'm a control freak. So I have like 6 of my team members sitting here, they know. In the middle of a night also, I'll check on them and say like, it's done, it's not done. So I am on top of the things, but every passing day and every passing year, I go to the one level up of top of things. I don't want to micromanage, but I want to have an idea of everything. So I stop over.
So sorry.
Yeah.
I see a very clear
We're
kind
running
of
out of
structured
time.
ability. So how have you structured it such that you're able to be on top of 60 people or 60 at the molecular level? Where do you see what? Or
I
what do you
think-
Can we
what
take
do you
this-
leave? What do you see?
Yeah.
Can we
he
take this
wants to take
offline
it
now, because
offline.
we're running out of time and we have to give Ankita a chance to answer your question from her perspective.
Your question was more directed to her, right? Okay, to both of us. So the structure that we have built out started out as a very collaborative platform where we had a lot of people pitch into the business. But now we are at this time frame or the life cycle of our company where we are getting a core team together. The platform that we have built is not at all a hierarchy-based one. It's extremely flat. Everybody wears different hats. I go right from making coffee for my employees to actually doing the strategy work, whereas the lady who handles digital marketing, she also advises on design. So we have a very flat hierarchy. So as we get in the right people, as long as they're culturally a match, I think that is the most important. We've burnt our fingers by getting a lot of fly-by-night people who just come and go. But culturally, if the person is a fit for your organization, then you'll never really dilute too much. You'll stay true to what your values really are.
Fantastic. So hats off to these two ladies. Great self-belief in them. And congratulations and all the best for the future.
Thank you so much.
Let's give them a big hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.